Mario Barrios and Manny Pacquiao fight to a draw. Now with that, Manny moves to 62-8-3, and Mario Barrios moves to 29-2. And it is actually significant that Barrios' last two fights have been draws, and I will circle back to this towards the end of this video. And on a side note, one of those three draws that Manny has was against the late friend of mine, Agapito Sanchez. That's the subject for another video altogether. But let's take a look at this result. A majority draw means that two judges out of the three scored it 6 rounds apiece for Pacquiao and Barrios. One judge scored it in favor of Barrios. Now, I know that there have been plenty of videos or posts out there saying Manny was robbed. Plenty of fighters have chimed in saying that Manny was robbed. I want to move past that a little bit, or I do want to move past that and not really debate whether he was robbed or not, mainly because even if Manny's robbed, it has exactly zero effect on his legacy. And furthermore, that draw has zero impact on Manny's future value as a fighter the next time he steps into the ring. So on the other hand, with a draw, that means Barrios gets to retain his title. And Barrios needs that title in order to command a higher pay scale. And the powers that be in boxing need Mario to have that belt in order to justify creating a card around him and marketing that fight, selling it to whomever, advertisers, etc. Of course, Pacquiao does not need a belt to command eyeballs. He could fight a 4-round exhibition, and I'm sure it would sell out, and I'm sure you could sell the tickets at a ridiculously high price, and it would still sell out, probably within minutes. Now, that being said, I did do a pretty extensive technical breakdown of both fighters before the fight. So rather than dwelling on scoring the bout round by round, I'd rather focus on revisiting those technical points, and I'll self-evaluate and say, well, how did I do in terms of my technical breakdown of both fighters? Okay, so if you haven't checked that out yet and you're a true fight fan, the link will be somewhere up here, and I'll also put it in the description below. So at your leisure, you can check that out. And so if this is the first time you're seeing one of my videos, welcome to my channel, HamaguchiFight. My name's D Hamaguchi. I'm a pro boxer. I'm also a judoka and was a U.S. national judo champion at 45 kilograms. And I also currently train in MMA. So I enjoy doing technical breakdowns of both MMA and boxing fights. And I appreciate you hitting up my channel, and please check out some more of the content on the Fight Breakdowns playlist, podcast list, if you're a fight fan. If you're not a fight fan, but you enjoy other aspects of the fight game, you can check out The Fight Life. You might find a few of my tips in there helpful. And if you just want to watch some little scenes from nature, check out the Meditations playlist. Okay, well, let's get on with this. So let's start with Barrios and take a look at what I said about Barrios' defense. Now, in that breakdown, I said that Barrios mostly used a variation of the high double guard that I called the peering through the window guard, like this, like he's a little kid looking out the window, hoping someone's coming home soon with a present for him. But what Barrios did in this was he adapted that a little bit and moved his hands out a little bit further from his face to just more the classic high double guard. Now, while there's a slight variation, the issue here is it has the same 3 weak points that this peering through the window guard has, which are, firstly, both of those guards, high double guard, leaves the center line completely open, both to the head and to the body. Second thing, both of those high guards do is they leave the back of the head behind the guard open for hooks on either side. And finally, if you're going to keep a high double guard, whether the hands are glued to your forehead or they're just slightly away from your forehead, your hands are too high to throw a jab. You don't throw a jab from your head level here. Certainly not if you're Barrios. He has to bring his hand down and then throw the jab, or he has to aim the jab down as he's throwing it. But in general, those are the three main issues with that high double guard, regardless of whether you're Mario Barrios or not. Those issues with that guard exists. Now, I did notice that, especially towards the later rounds, Barrios did kind of revert back to his old habit of doing his peer through the window guard. But either way, again, all three weaknesses are still present. Now, in terms of head movement, I did see also a slight shift with Barrios in that department, because I noticed he started kind of mirroring what Manny does, which is, Manny's always kind of bending a little bit at his waist and preemptively moving his head side to side with his upper body. And I noticed Mario was also making that similar motion. So I'm assuming that's a tactic that they chose during his training camp with his coach. Now, is it helpful to mirror your opponent, especially if they're doing certain types of motions like that? Well, I'm not so sure, mainly because if you start mirroring your opponent, you're falling into their rhythm and their frequency. I believe every fighter has their own sort of natural rhythm, their own natural tempo at which they can move and throw the punches most effectively. And if you allow yourself to fall into your opponent's rhythm, then now you're stuck in their groove. What you want to do is impose your will and your tempo, override their tempo, break up their rhythm, catch them on the offbeat, so to speak. So maybe Team Barrios figured if they start doing that similar back and forth motion with Manny, that they'll be more of a moving target, a little bit harder to hit. I'm not sure what the logic behind that was. But regardless, let's move on to footwork. Now, I was incredibly critical of Barrios's footwork and stance, and I still am, because those points remain. So his stance was still too wide, his feet are too far apart, and Barrios was still putting a lot of his weight over his front foot because he has a tendency to lean forward. But to his credit, during this fight versus Pacquiao, Barrios was a little more nimble on his feet than I've seen him in other fights. However, the main issue I have with Barrios' stance is the fact that he turns his torso square to his opponents, facing straight forward, which kind of explains why he adopts this high double guard, because if he would turn and shift his torso a little bit to his right and create an angle, what MMA fighters call a more bladed stance, then Barrios would help himself out by, one, creating a smaller target area, because when you're square facing your opponent, you're giving them the maximum surface area to hit. And indeed, Freddie Roach was urging Manny to hit him hard to the body because it was right there, right? Especially for, a shorter fighter facing back. Barrios wants to stand square, he's giving away his body. The second and probably more important issue that Barrios creates by standing square is he takes away from himself, right? His best punch is his long, sharp jab, and his best combination is that nice, smooth jab right hand. Now, if he would just turn his torso to create that angle, he's now gained an inch or two on his reach for his jab, and by positioning his right shoulder further back, now he has even more torque on his right hand when he lets that come straight down the pike. But when both shoulders are even, now you've taken away from both punches. That the slight, those few inches do make a difference, because, as they say, boxing is a game of inches, if not centimeters. Now, in revisiting all this Mario Barrios defensive technical flaws, I had an epiphany, which is that I believe that Barrios kind of took two wrongs to try to make a right. And what I mean by that is, I think the reason he decided to make his stance too wide like that is to give away his height, bring himself down. So now, because he always wants his high double guard, if he spreads his feet out more, now his whole upper torso is lower. So now at least his hands are a little bit lower, and he doesn't have to either reach down or drop his hand down and then fire his jab. Does that kind of make sense? It's like, but it's like, goodness, Mary, if you would just learn a proper stance and turn your torso, you wouldn't have to try to take two wrongs to make it right. Just get it right from the get-go. But that's not something that happened with him when he first started out in the gym. So as a side note, again, when I revisited this fight and listened into the live American commentary, I should warn you guys, whatever that team was saying, it's opposite day for them. So take it 180 degrees in the other direction. So for example, somebody chimes in during the fight, oh, Barrios is starting to use his height and reach. And no, he's not. He never uses his height and reach. He always gives it away because of those 2 points I just said. His feet are too wide, that lowers him. So he just gave away height. And because he's standing square, he's taking away from his own reach. Now, even with that, even by him taking away from himself, he still has a height and reach advantage versus Manny Pacquiao, but you can't say he's using it. You could say he's giving it away in ineptness, and yet he still has the advantage over his opponents. In other words, he's getting away with it, but you can't say he ever uses his height and reach. That's just complete misstatement. Okay, so that's my little rant about the live commentators on the American broadcast. I won't even start about what somebody was wearing in the stand-up commentary. That's another video. Now, in terms of Mario Barrios' offensive skills, I think my initial breakdown held true. For sure, his best weapon was that nice long straight jab, and his best combination is that jab straight right hand. I didn't see as much of that jab straight right hand as I would have liked to have seen with Barrios. One thing I noticed that he did do, which was a flaw, I think, was he, instead of throwing, say, a quick double jab, he started rushing in behind, say, a triple jab, and he'd step in behind each jab. I guess the idea was that he would just push Manny back with his jab, use it like a sword, I suppose. But there was that one instance where he was coming forward with so much momentum that he lost his balance, and Barrios wound up on the canvas simply by being too enthusiastic, rushing forward with multiple jabs, stepping in. While I didn't see the jab right hand as much as I would have liked to have seen from Barrios, and he did do that little error I spoke about, which is celebrate his right hand after he threw it. I do have to give him credit for using his jab effectively when he did, because I believe the optics certainly favored him in that sense, because with that jab, with that nice long stabbing jab, Mario was able to snap Manny's head straight back. And in fact, I think that's the optic that caused that one judge to award Barrios the majority of the rounds. Now, just to let myself off the hook a little bit, because during our live, I said that because of those optics, I thought Barrios was going to get the decision. Here's the thing, though. When we were doing the live, I was also trying to watch UFC fights. So I had my screen, I had two windows open on my screen. And so the Barrios Pacquiao fight was literally smaller, maybe the size of your phone right now if you're looking at this video on a phone, which meant that the full figures were about an inch tall. So there's no subtlety was visible from that far away, wide camera angle and at that scale on my own screen, because I had half the territory I would normally have if I was just watching one fight at a time instead of boxing and UFC. So I'm sort of giving myself that excuse for not being able to pick up the subtlety of what Manny was doing. So here's what I noticed when I was able to see some of the posts on social media, which were from a camera angle that was like, literally at the ringside. At that distance, that's as close as you need to be to pick up on all the subtle, tiny motions that Manny makes. They're just these millisecond movements that he does to kind of fake faint out his opponent, whether it's just a small gesture or a small motion as if he's going to go one direction, but he's actually then going to come back the other direction. Then maybe he fakes back to the first direction. This is all lost when you have a camera that's taking in the entire ring, right? There's just no way to capture that. So I guess my point is a lot of what Manny's capable of is only visible if you have an incredibly tight camera angle, or you happen to be at the fight live sitting very close in one of the very expensive seats. So I think that's why some of us who are watching, a stream on a device might have thought it looked like Barrios was ahead, simply because the optic of Manny's head snapping back. Now let's take a look at Manny Pacquiao's performance. I won't go through the whole laundry list of the technical breakdown I did for him. I feel most of that was fairly accurate. And Manny's such an established fighter. These skill sets that he has are really not going to shift or change very much from fight to fight. The only thing that he and Freddie will do is start to emphasize a little. Freddie is such a great trainer and cornerman and analyst that he'll come up with a little custom-made combination or sort of footwork pattern to punch or counter, specifically custom-made for one of Manny's opponents. So, for example, Ricky Hatton. The one big question I had regarding how Manny Pacquiao would perform was, when would the ring rust fall off? Because I said, there's no way you can say there's no such thing as ring rust. It's there. The only issue is, when does it fall off? And the answer for me, I think it looked like either it fell off in the change room before Manny got in the ring, or it fell off pretty early on in that first round, because not only was Manny able to split Mario Barrios' guard with his jab and make contact, he's, like I said, that center line's open, right? So Manny was able to land that. He was also able to land his straight left. Again, just splitting the guard. And it was pretty early on, like just the second or third round, where Manny started doing his, what I call his drive-by overhand left, which means he's cutting that angle to Manny's right side by taking a step with his right foot forward at an angle. And even though his head is leaning over towards the right, his left hand is following straight down the center line. He was able to do that early in the fight, like the second or third round. And that's really one of his bread and butter moves. So throughout the fight, Manny was able to land combinations. He was able to create angles with his footwork. I think those things only got more comfortable for him as the fight progressed. What he wasn't able to do is knock Mario Barrios out, which is what I had predicted in my pre-fight breakdown. So what was missing in terms of that aspect of getting the actual KO? Well, I didn't realize it, but Manny said in his post-fight interview that he had an 8-week camp to prepare for this fight. 8 weeks is really what is absolute minimum in terms of a fight camp for, say, just a 4-round fight. An average 4-round fighter should put in a good solid 8-week training camp in order to prepare. That's just how much time you need to get your body ready for a fight. Not just the conditioning, but the mental aspect of the hard sparring and get your body ready to get hit. The only way you can do that is through hard sparring. I believe that if Manny Pacquiao had a 12 or 16-week camp in order to prepare for this 12-round world title fight, I think we would have seen Manny at just throwing slightly sharper combinations and just a little bit more explosive. And I believe that's what was missing in order to get a KO versus Mario Barrios. Now, nevertheless, that's not to take away from Manny's performance at all, because I think not only did he prove all the doubters wrong, many folks feel that Pacquiao was the more effective aggressor for the majority of the rounds and actually deserved the victory. So Manny's draw is really a victory for him in the end. Now, to address the issues of what the naysayers said, Manny would lose due to his being out for 4 years and due to his age. They said, well, he's going to lose his legs. Lost either speed or his footwork agility. The one aspect of Manny's game that might have been diminished, perhaps by his mature age of 46, is his meanness. Or, it's not like Manny was ever, one of those fighters that trash talks versus his opponent or anything like that. But I think every fighter needs to conjure up a little bit of an edge when they're in there, because you have to be willing to go for the kill, as we say, right? But it looked to me like it was Manny who was initiating those glove touches at the beginning of every round. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to zoom in and analyze who's actually trying to, make first contact with their gloves. But either way, that type of glove touching, that only occurs in sparring. You only touch gloves at the beginning of each round, and if you're on good terms with your sparring partner, as you should be, you touch gloves again at the end of the round, just to acknowledge each other. It's a form of respect. But you most certainly do not do that in a fight. You do not touch gloves until the last round, when the ref should insist that both fighters touch gloves. It's just one of those understood things that we don't touch gloves every round in a fight. So was that a sign of weakness? I don't think so. I think it's just more, I believe that Manny feels or felt that he could win this fight purely on technique, and conditioning, which is absolutely true. Barrios, as I broke down in my pre-fight breakdown, has so many fundamental flaws that even a Manny Pacquiao at 75% is capable of defeating Barrios. More so because of Barrios' flaws than because of anything Manny has to do to be spectacular. He doesn't. So in the end, if that is the case, I certainly can't fault Manny at all for if he's had a shift in how he carries himself in the ring in terms of what he holds in his heart regarding his opponent. Because, Manny's already been there, done everything. He's conquered 8 weight divisions. He's in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. He's an icon. He's a globally recognized person. He's a humanitarian. He's a politician. He's a hero in the Philippines. So why would he need to conjure up, a chip on his shoulder to go into the ring? He doesn't need that anymore. That's not what's going to motivate him to get a win in the ring, right? So I think we can all grant him that. Now, let's circle back to the point as to why is a draw the ideal outcome for the powers that be in boxing. Well, I did make a short little video about that, but just to quickly reiterate, with a draw, it's perfect for the powers that be because Manny does not need a belt to demand or command a ton of money, right? Like I said, people will show up in droves, pay a ridiculously high ticket price just to see him, even in a 4-round exhibition. So the belt I wouldn't say it's worthless. It means something to him and his team, but it doesn't necessarily make him worth any more money than he's already worth. On the other hand, Mario Barrios certainly cannot command a higher purse without that belt. I believe without that belt, Barrios is back to fighting for low 6 digits, maybe even high 5 digits. I don't know. But here's the thing. It's not even about Barrios per se. I believe this is the boxing industry keeping the Texas Commission happy. Now, why am I saying this? Well, okay, so let's look at the big boxing commissions in the United States of America. I'm not sure how this works in the UK or in other countries, but in the United States of America, because of how our Constitution is set up, these United States, right, these states have authority over sports and over labor and over education and a litany of other things. But that's just how we set our country up. So, for example, okay, so the 3 big states in terms of boxing are New York with New York City, California with Los Angeles, and Nevada with Las Vegas. In all 3 of those states, boxing is governed by what we call a state athletic commission. So it's the New York State Athletic Commission, Nevada State Athletic Commission, and California State Athletic Commission. These are the individuals, these are the bureaucrats who go over minutia about the rules in the ring. I mean, California was so sort of full of themselves, they decided at one point they could tell you, the fighter, what you were allowed to drink in your change room. Now, I mean, provided it's not alcohol, like they wanted you to have nothing other than water. So I couldn't have a Red Bull or a coffee in my change room, supposedly, at that point. In any case, I'm digressing a bit, but that's what these athletic commissions do. They oversee all the logistics of the fight. They have officials who are supposed to watch. If it's a title fight, they're supposed to watch the people getting their hands wrapped. They're the ones that sign off on the gloves. There's always an athletic commission official in the corners to make sure nothing funny is going on between rounds or even during the fight. Now, here's the interesting thing though. In Texas, it's not the Texas State Athletic Commission. It's the Texas Department of Labor. So, I mean, this warrants even a little bit more research, maybe on my part, as to why that's the case, like why Texas doesn't have a Texas State Athletic Commission. Instead, your boxing license is issued by the Department of Labor. So it's the same department where I guess you'd have to go get a license if you were a contractor or something. Because I guess they consider boxers to be just laborers as opposed to athletes. I don't know. So bottom line here is, you know, those three big boxing commissions, New York, California, and Vegas. Well, all three of those states and all three of those major cities are destination cities, regardless of whether there's a boxing fight or not, correct? So even if there's no world champion in the state of New York at the moment, they're still going to put on world title fights at Madison Square Garden or the Barclays Center. Same thing with Nevada. Even if there's no current reigning world champion who resides in Las Vegas, they're still going to be able to put on big fights at the MGM Grand, right? Same thing holds true for Los Angeles. We don't need a California world champion in order to justify drawing a big fight to LA. Now, by contrast, what about Texas? Is San Antonio or Dallas, are these big draws? No, I mean, quite honestly, they're not boxing hotbeds, and they're not necessarily as big tourist cities where people would say, you know, maybe make a whole vacation of going to see the fights in New York. Even if the fight were to fall off, there'd still be plenty of other things that one could do over the weekend with your friends and family. If the fight should fall off in Vegas, New York, or LA, you still got plenty of things to do, right? What about Texas? Maybe not, right? So Texas needs a homegrown world champion in order to justify putting on a world title fight in the state of Texas. Now, again, why does this matter? This is what I broke down before. This matters because that commission, or in this case, the labor board of Texas, PDLR, I think is the acronym. They get a piece of the world champion's purse. So when Mario Barrios defends his title in his home state of Texas, they get a percentage of whatever his purse is because he's the world champion. So now here's what's interesting, right? I said Barrios has 2 draws. Those are his last 2 fights versus Manny Pacquiao and versus, do you know who his previous opponent was? It was Abel Ramos. And that fight took place in Texas. And that fight was a draw. Now, the fact that you may not know who Abel Ramos is significant because he was clearly brought in as a B-side fighter for Barrios to defend his belt in his backyard, right? And yet Barrios got a draw. So what does that tell you? He probably lost the fight. Ramos probably won the fight. That's how you read, you know, that's how you read it when the B-side fighter comes into the champion's backyard and gets a draw. You pretty much assume that the B-side won. Well, that they can't let that happen. They have to make sure their homegrown talent keeps that belt so they can keep milking it for what it's worth for as long as they can, right? And again, I did a more extensive breakdown about all this in the pre-fight breakdown, But if you dig a few layers deep, you'll understand that Mario Barrios is basically a manufactured world champion. The most telling point of that is his entry into this whole chain of events was for a 10-round intercontinental belt, which was versus somebody who normally fought at the weight division below him. So, and you got to know that this is all set up. This is all bought and sold in advance. There's no way somebody 140 pounds should suddenly be elevated to fight for any kind of belt at the next highest weight division, right? But in the fight game, that fellow probably knew, hey, this is his chance to maybe pull an upset for a belt and probably make more money than he's ever made in any of his other fights. So he's going to take that chance, right? You can never blame the B-side person for stepping up to the plate. So I'm saying all that to say this really kind of explains why it had to be a draw no matter what. Now, given that it's a draw, oftentimes folks will say, well, then there needs to be an immediate rematch. And in fact, one of our viewers posed that question in one of the comments. And my feeling is absolutely not. I don't want to watch that again. In fact, I almost feel like I have to go watch some really good boxing to erase that off my hard drive, because I'm a true believer in garbage in, garbage out. And in other words, if I input that bad boxing of Mario Barrios' bad habits, I don't want to output that when it comes to my own boxing. So no, I don't want to see Pacquiao Barrios too. Please no, please let's not do that. It's really not necessary, because Manny doesn't need to fight Barrios again. For what? To try to snatch that belt? He doesn't need a belt. If he wants to fight Floyd Mayweather, that's between he and Floyd. I personally don't think Floyd is going to want to drop down to 147. I'm guessing he's probably walking around 180 something. I don't know that Floyd even wants to drop down to 154. So it's a hard ask for Manny to jump up a weight division again and to try to get Floyd to cut down. But other than that, I really think that Manny can ask for whoever he wants, because we will tune in to watch him fight. We will tune in to see him, even as I said, fight a 4-round exhibition. So I don't think it's an issue. I think he will certainly generate interest. He will sell pay-per-views. He will put rear ends and seats in the venue. So I'm just interested to see what Manny chooses to do next. And quite frankly, I'm really not interested in watching Mario Barrios fight again. So, God bless him, I wish him all the best with the rest of his boxing career, but I'm not compelled to tune in unless he happens to be fighting another fighter that I'm really interested in. So who would you like to see Manny face next? Do you care to see Mario Barrios defend his belt against another fighter? And if so, who do you think that earned a shot at that 147 WBC world title fight? Let me know your thoughts about this post-fight breakdown. Let me know your thoughts about the fight. Let me know who you'd like to see Manny face next. I look forward to reading all your comments. Thank you very much for listening.